Hello, you beautiful people, you. My name is Cody. You can call me Cab, whatever works for you. And today we get to talk about Gears of War, one of probably my favorite franchises of all time. It's definitely not my favorite, but it's up there. One of the best in my mind. So, we're going to go through, talk about Gears, just starting off, just looking at everything we have here, talk about the holiday of October, because it's finally fucking Spooktober. Now then, to start things off, explaining what Gears of War is. Gears of War is a story of sadness, heartbreak, violence, and chainsaws. So pretty much something for all ages. So, Gears of War is the story about a war between humans and an enemy called Locust that come from the ground. Probably the most basic war story you'll hear of. We're the heroes and we gotta go against the aliens that are coming at us, and we have special weapons like chainsaws on our guns. That's pretty much what it is. Now, the only difference that happens with all of this is that it's on a different planet. There's 26 hours that go on for a single day. The planet's called Sarah. Different architecture, story of things that have happened. That kind of thing. Now, for people who are getting into Gears of War that are just starting it because of the announcement that happened, Gears 5, the pop figurine battle royal thing, whatever that is, and also the new PC game that'll be coming out that's pretty much Gears of War, like a tactical game like Halo Wars or XCOM. Sorry about the sound. I used to live above a bakery, but now it's being renovated, and I don't know what it's being turned into, but they've been pounding away and demolishing things downstairs, so my bad on that end. Anyway, where was I? Anyway, Gears of War. For people who are just starting off, learning about Gears of War, wanting to get into it, it's not that hard to get into compared to other things like Metal Gear, or there's a fighting game I play called BlazBlue. That one you have to really think about because the story's a little hard to wrap your mind around. Things like that are a little more harder to grasp or get around. Like, where would you start with Metal Gear? Gears of War, I mean, it's the answer you give for any franchise, really. Gears of War begins from the first game. Story-wise, not really, because there are things that happen before, but if you start off with the first Gears of War, you can start building up from there, and you can understand things that are going on. You can go through the games. But the games aren't the only things that are around, because if you look right here, right, the beautiful emblem of them all, Gears of War also had comics released. It had books released. For instance, right here, the slab. Now, Anvil Gate I've got at the top of this pile right here. And little thing about me, I have not yet finished the slab. So anyone who wants to write in the comments what happens, go ahead. I already know, but I personally haven't finished reading it. Now, something that I'm going to do that I've always wanted, I'm probably going to go through each of these games and books and comics one by one. I've debated which way to do it. I debated whether to go in order from releases or to go by what the timeline has. But the problem is, if you go by games, then you're slowly working your way up, and you have to then go by the comics by themselves, and then you have to go by the books by themselves in different sections. And the issue is that the books go into the games because the third game was written by the same author of the books, so you have to argue what's canon or not. As you can see, there's a lot of things you have to worry about at one point, and the word canon, that's a whole other can of worms, because in the early days of Gears, like a vet like myself, you really didn't know what was or wasn't canon or what was true to the story. You know, you had the comics, but you had to ask, well, are the comics telling a portion of the story that happened, or is this something that didn't happen in the main story? Like, for instance, right here is the first comic volume that ever came out. It introduces a character named Jace. Jace is referenced in Gears of War 2, which is in this pile behind Gears 4. The issue is that Jace, it can be argued whether or not he is canon. until you get to 3 and you meet him and he's mentioned in the books, which is written by the same author, who's in 3. It becomes a headache. But back in the day, you didn't know if he was or not. He just got referenced. So what I decided was, instead of doing it by that or the timeline, because the timeline takes us all the way back to something called Anvil Gate, and that's only referenced and talked about in the books and the third game, easiest way to do this is to start at the very beginning, which would probably be starting with Anvil Gate. But again, that's in the book. I don't want to start there. And unfortunately, the only comic I don't have currently for the volume set is Gears of War Rise of Rom, which would be where I would start, but because of my schedule, I haven't had time to sit down and actually read the book or even own it. I am ordering it, I just don't have it yet. And I don't really want to hold off on this since I finally have time to sit down and do these videos. So we're going to be starting with something no one likes. We're going to be starting with a little game called Gears of War Judgment, which by many is considered to be possibly the worst Gears of War game ever made. Welcome to the Gears discussion videos, everyone. Welcome to talking about the games, the books, the characters, the fandom, stories. Oh god. We're in a ride. We're gonna be on a fucking ride. Oh my god. Gears of War Judgment. Expect a discussion soon. And I should also mention, before I end this, not only will the games and everything be covered, I want to go over all the characters too. Because there's a lot of characters, and the writer of the books, Karen Traviss, goes very much into detail on them. And she talks about, you know, how they cope with the war going on, how everything like that goes on in the background, what they're like in their private time when they're not on pretty much the front lines fighting against mutant mole alien people. We'll go over the Locust too, don't worry. But she flushes them out really well, and it's to the point where you can talk about these characters and the things they've done and how it affects them. So I do want to go over characters, but again, if we're starting with Judgment, I would prefer if I talk about characters that haven't been introduced yet, or characters that really don't play that major of a role right away. For instance, there's 2 characters that are 3 if we're talking about Locust characters that are introduced that I would like to go over first. Because after this game, one of them isn't really mentioned that much. The second one is kind of brought up because they're in Rise of Rom. And the third one was recently in Gears of War 4, well, recently within 2 years, had a small bit of information in Gears of War 4 that gives you more information on the character called Paddock, who was a part of something called the UIR, which is another military from the COG. That's another story, because then that goes into the Pendulum Wars, and that's talked about in, let's see if I got it, Asphodel Fields, which is pretty much the war that ended a major, almost century-long war. This is why we go through them one by one. There's too much to talk about. So, once Gears of War Judgment is taken care of, we'll go into characters. And 2 of the characters in it are very prominent characters. Even though we're just going over Judgment, I don't mind jumping into what they do later on in the future. For instance, the first Gears of War game, which is just Gears of War. Gears of War 2, what they do in the books, what their own side stories in the books are, what goes on with them in the comics. Those kind of things. I don't mind going over them. Marcus Phoenix, who is the main character, you could say, of the entire franchise, he is pretty much introduced in the first game, but he's not really in Rise of Rom or in Judgment. He makes a brief cameo. We'll go over it when we get to it. But I'm going to save him for when we get into Gears of War, because then I can start talking about him when he's introduced, when you learn about pretty much what makes Marcus Marcus. Because I don't know if this is a spoiler for anyone from a game that came out such a long time ago. Marcus isn't an asshole, but he's definitely a silent stoic type is probably the best word. But again, that'll be after the Gears of War video. So, my beautiful, beautiful gathering of fucking death and destruction. Gears of War. I hope to see you guys in the next one, because we get to go over the pearl of the entire franchise. Oh. Have a good one, everyone. Hope to see you next time. The Jedis are gonna feel this one. I forgot to tell you. Also, I was gonna mention in the video, but I completely forgot. I'm gonna try and have like a prop or something, at least like the game or comic with me with every discussion, or with a character, at least a prop or something. And I didn't really have anything like Gears of War on me at the moment. I have a straight edge necklace, but you know, I don't have any dog or cog tags. I don't. So the best I had at the moment was I have Gears of War socks. Like there's the emblem right here. Yeah, so Gears of War socks is the big thing I have on hand that starts off this entire, I guess, series you could call it. And I didn't think I would have more, but I mean, Gears of War sock, it's something. Yep.